got a chance! Grand slam! The Yankees win! And a touchdown!
He goes to the net! He scores! He scores!
Home run! Number 3 of the night!
Hello, everybody. Big City Sports Podcast coming at you on another Thursday afternoon. Jonah, welcome back. It's good to have you back. How are you feeling?
It's good to be back, Dylan, and talk sports with you guys.
All right. Swig?
Doing good, guys. Excited to get this show on the road.
All right. We have a lot of topics to touch on today. We have a lot of Yankees injuries that we have to bring up. Back on the shelf again. We mentioned Stanton in the last episode, but there has been more additions, so stay tuned for those. Dominic Smith's on a tear. The Cubs dropped a few over the weekend, and the White Sox, they disappointed a little bit, although they did hit 4 consecutive home runs. The Hawks survive, at least for a little bit, and the Islanders are looking very good. And then we got our takeaways from the Nets Game 1, along with the NBA Draft Lottery coming up Thursday night. So, guys, the Yankees are injured again. Swig, I'll go to you first because the Yankees, Yankee fan being that you are. And what do you think about Aaron Judge, DJ LeMahieu, and a few others that have hit the shelf?
Well, obviously, I'm not thrilled that they're injured yet again, but the Yankees continuing to succeed while they're all on the shelf is really a great testament to the depth in the organization. We're continuing to see that. It was a big theme last year with all the injuries, and we have guys that would be starting for other teams that are depth for us, like Clint Frazier and Miguel Andujar, and more recently Tyler Wade and Thairo Estrada really stepping up. So obviously frustrated that they're injured, but the Yankees are continuing to succeed, and it just shows how important depth is to an organization.
Yeah, and mentioning the depth, A-Rod the other night on ESPN said that he'd take the Yankees B lineup against other teams' A lineup. And that's a little bold if you ask me, maybe a little hometown bias from A-Rod on those statements. But I like what they're doing. They're mixing and matching. And honestly, for the first time in a long time, the Yankees lineup, I think it was yesterday on Sunday, they went left, right, left, right, left, right, all the way down the lineup. And I can't tell you the last time they've done that. They're a big
I think it's been
right-handed
since
power
about
team.
2005.
Yeah, big right-handed power team usually. And then to mix everybody like that, they had Tauchman, Ford, and a bunch of other guys to mix in. Jonah, what do you think about the Yankees' injuries and what they're going to have to do?
Well, Swig hit on it and said their depth is great, and I agree with that. Last year, they had 103 wins with a bunch of injuries. I don't believe Judge was injured that much, but Giancarlo Stanton was injured for most of the season. They can play well even without some of their best guys in there. Obviously, you're going to need them for the playoffs, but it just speaks volume to how good a manager Aaron Boone is since he took over the Yankees squad. The depth, the young players being brought in, Giancarlo being put on the shelf, like you guys said, and then you have multiple guys that can fill his shoes and still be a pretty good squad. Go ahead. Dead space, and then I'm just going to send it off back to you, Dylan. Talk about Dominic.
Okay. You mentioned the depth, both of you guys, and one name that's really stepped up for the Yankees, honestly, every single time he's been up on the team has been Clint Frazier.
Absolutely.
I don't know what Cashman's thinking about just keeping him down. I mean, the guy always comes up and hits the baseball. He's a great left fielder. Not a great left fielder, but he hits the ball. And
You're going to say, wait a minute.
Yeah, he hits the ball. I mean, that's what you need when these guys are on the shelf. And honestly, if the Yankees can just sit through the struggle right now and find a way to win baseball games, then by the time the postseason runs around, as long as they have all their players back, then I love their chances to make a deep run into the postseason.
No, absolutely. There's definitely a lot to be optimistic about. It's following a similar blueprint to last season. Jonah mentioned all the injuries. Pretty much every regular, not named LeMahieu or Gleyber Torres, got hurt at some point last season. We're starting to see that again this year. And Tommy Kahnle already got hurt to take a little hit off that bullpen, although Chapman is back for tonight's game. We're recording this as of Monday night. But, yeah, Clint Frazier has been fantastic the 5 games since he's been up. And, I think he would be a starter for most other teams in the league right now, and he's our 5th or 6th outfielder. It just shows how much depth we have. But saying he's good in left field is like saying Alfonso Soriano was good at second base. It's just not a true statement.
Yeah, I'm going to want to eat my words on that one. But Aroldis Chapman is back. That can do wonders for their bullpen. And transitioning over to the New York Mets, Dominic Smith is tearing the cover off the ball for them and giving them some great offense, at least as of last week. And it sort of reminds me of a situation the Brewers were in a few years ago. You have the big right-handed power bat in Jesus Aguilar, who made the All-Star team and played in the Home Run Derby. He was a big right-handed stick. And then he started to struggle, and you had Eric Thames there. So the two right-handed, left-handed first basemen that can absolutely hit the ball. And Mets fans for a while knew that Dominic Smith was going to be the future of the first base position for them. But Pete Alonso jumped on the scene last year. If the DH is there to stay in the National League, that's going to be huge for them. Robinson Cano came back and looked very good over the weekend as well. The pitching has just been awful. But if they find a way to get better at the play or get better on the mound, then with what Dominic Smith and Robinson Cano have been able to do, you've seen Alonso get a little bit hot recently, but that offense was really taking to start to take a jump. And Jeff McNeil got injured. Hopefully he's not out too long.
Yeah, I would say Dominic Smith is like one bright spot for the Mets this year. Obviously, DeGrom is always going to be good for that team, but I believe he has a neck injury. I believe he's slated to start Wednesday against the Marlins, though. Of course, as Swiggy said, we are recording this on Monday, so you guys would have already seen him start. But over to Swiggy to talk about a little bit more about Dominic Smith and what you think about the Mets so far. A little bit of a sluggish start.
Yeah, no, Dominic Smith has absolutely been one of the few bright spots for the Mets, but overall his impact in terms of wins and losses is going to be pretty minimal while the starting rotation and the bullpen continues to struggle like it has. The Mets, unlike the Yankees, do have a pretty balanced lineup. They have some left-handed bats like Nimmo and Conforto and McNeil who can really make an impact, and then they got guys like Pete Alonso coming from the right side that can kind of balance that out. But overall, the only reason Smith is getting these at-bats is because Cespedes pulled the bizarre move to opt out of the season, because Smith is a first baseman by trade, and Dylan mentioned he was looked at as the future at the position a few years back, but Alonso kind of took over that in a very big way last season, and he is not going to take any at-bats away from him. So the only reason Smith is getting these at-bats is because the DH spot is available for the Mets right now, and if that does go away with next season or goes back to the previous rules, then I do struggle to see a real role for him on the team, because platooning him with Alonso just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, let me bring up a question to you, Swig. Yeah, if Dominic Smith learns left field, then that's going to be huge for that ball club. You can move McNeil over to third and have Cespedes at second. Maybe J.D. Davis will platoon in left against lefties, but you have Nimmo and Conforto on the other outfield spots. And if he can find a way to be serviceable out there in lefts, if the DH is lifted the following year, then maybe you get that bat in the lineup out there in left, similar to what the Cubs did with Kyle Schwarber, taking him out of his catcher position.
I do think that makes a lot of sense if it turns out well enough where he can at least learn left field to be serviceable out there. At the same time, I do think we have to pump the brakes a little bit here and say this is still a very small sample size for Dominic Smith, and he could easily come back to earth here within the next 3 days before this actually is uploaded. So I don't want to get ahead of ourselves too much in terms of this crazy, season and the weird scenario that's the only reason Smith is getting at bats at all. But if he is able to prove himself that this is just not a hot 2 weeks and that he can continue this at least to some extent going forward, I do think the Mets should be creative in terms of finding a way to get his bat in the lineup, but that's also easier said than done.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That makes a lot of sense. We're going to transition over to the Chicago Cubs, and they dropped a few over the weekend, and I'm just going to give you guys a heads up. I'm about to get heated. The Cubs made me upset. Not that they lost 3 out of 4 to the Brewers, not that they dropped the doubleheader today, I'm assuming, because the game's still going on right now, but then again, they're in a struggling streak right now. And I'm going to bring it up right now. The name that comes to mind that makes me furious about the Chicago Cubs right now is Chris Bryant. Okay, he's struggling. So what? This is a guy, he needs to be tough. This guy, I mean, he's their first-round pick, NL MVP, NL Rookie of the Year, World Series champion, and he's not showing the heart of a champion out there. He's sitting out games with a little ding on his finger, which allowed him to stay in the game and play left in Cleveland. And then he's sitting and goes off and plays third or sits the next 2 days, and then he comes back. And for a struggling hitter, I get it if one of those days was a day off. But, I mean, this is a guy who's always missing time, whether he has a headache and can't play third base. He needs to start bringing the attitude of a winning club, because if he doesn't, I'm not giving him any money if I'm Theo Epstein.
Well, like I mentioned, the Cubs were due for a little bit of regression. They weren't going to go 13-3 every 16 games for the whole season. That's just ridiculous. I understand the frustration with Kris Bryant, but considering they have the big cushion in the Central with every other team struggling and the Pittsburgh Pirates just sucking balls, the Cubs can definitely afford a couple of games where Kris Bryant can get back to himself, maybe get in the right headspace. I get that the injury does not sound all that significant on the surface. I think it's more just using that to get a couple of days to mentally reset and refocus so we can come back ready to go, starting hopefully with this series. I'm not sure how he's doing in tonight's doubleheader, but I honestly think that the toughness questions are a little bit overblown. I get that he has his moments where he can be a little bit outspoken, but overall, he's still been a very key contributor to that team. So I think that some of the frustration is not quite warranted. I wouldn't go that far. Now, he does need to start producing before the end of the season for the Cubs to actually want to keep him around. I do agree with that. But putting, down in terms of his character or his leadership qualities, I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, I guess I could see that. But then again, this guy, he's always had something wrong. Like, he's always the little things, like he nicks his elbow and he sits out 2 games. In a 60-game season, those things are going to catch up to you, and you need to perform. This is baseball. You got to go out there and play. This core isn't going to be together for much longer, and that's a topic for another episode. We might touch on that later on, like a few months down the line, saying this season is over. But I think it is a knock on his character. This guy, I mean, he has the abilities to be a winner, but he doesn't have the toughness. You go back to being hit by pitches and he's sitting out. I mean, Anthony Rizzo takes balls every single time right in the rib cage, and he's in there battling the next day. Kris Bryant's sitting out, and I mean, I don't care if it's a knock on his character, but I also don't think he's a leadoff hitter. He does get on base a lot, but he hasn't as of late. That's a knock on Theo Epstein. He hasn't been able to get a leadoff hitter since Dexter Fowler. He tried John Jay in 2017. He tried a bunch of other people. He tried Almora up there, didn't work. Rizzo up there sometimes, but he's not going to stay there. Madden tried Hayward every single time he got hot, then he got cold. And then Ian Happ, I mean, it almost destroyed his career putting him up there. Schwarber's career was almost destroyed in the one hole, and he needs to get a leadoff hitter. That brings me to my next question. Theo Epstein was on ESPN 1000 earlier today and said that he thinks this 2020 team can be special. If you're the Chicago Cubs, are you willing to make a deal with the Kansas City Royals and maybe give up a little bit of your future to go get Whit Merrifield, a leadoff hitter, center field, second base, and maybe a Greg Holland or a little reliever that can give him some bullpen help? I'll go to Swig. What do you think?
Yes, I'm absolutely willing to make that deal. I know we've talked about the Cubs window being short with most of their key guys like Bryant and Rizzo and Baez not being under contract for more than another year or two. So with it being far from a guarantee that any of those guys are kept around, much less all of them, the Cubs need to be aggressive in maximizing the window now.
Yeah, the old adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Cubs are 13-7, likely to be 14-7 after today, Monday. The bullpen isn't great, but I did look at a stat over the weekend, and the Cubs bullpen actually pitches pretty well in tight games, and they are just disastrous in games where we have actually, I think 3 blowout losses the Cubs do out of their 7 so far, and the bullpen has basically added on to those, if you will. You guys probably know what I mean. So in tight games, the Cubs actually, their bullpen steps up. Divisional games the last few days, Dylan touched on it. We aren't doing so hot. This game should be kind of a spark for us. But to go after somebody like Whit Merrifield, yes, I think Swiggy's right. We're going to have to give up a lot. He is proving to be one of the most, like Swiggy said, underrated players there is. And I know Dylan said last offseason he would be a great leadoff hitter for us. And, well, he was right. He proved yet again, year in and year out, he can do it. Great for the Royals. Too bad the Royals he's not on a very good team. But over to Dylan, we got to get going on the hockey, I believe it is.
No, the White Sox are next. We're going to get to them, but I want to bring up a little bit more on the Cubs. If you look at their bullpen, there's only one left-handed reliever in that bullpen, and it's Kyle Ryan. He's got an ERA north of 8. I think they need to get another left-handed arm. They drafted a kid in this year's draft, 2020, named Burl Carraway. He's a left-handed pitcher, and they drafted him to possibly use him this year. So don't be surprised to see Carraway make his MLB debut before he pitches an inning of minor league baseball, because he was a college pitcher, and he can honestly make those pitches in the big stage. So, I mean, there's not a lot of left-handed depth. They got Rex Brothers and Justin Steele, who might get called up to start game 2 of the doubleheader on Wednesday. But they need to find a way to get better left-handed relief out of that bullpen, because Kyle Ryan's been overworked. I like him, but he's been overworked because he's the only one on the roster, to be fair. So I have a point on the White Sox. So over the weekend, they looked bad, and then they got their 4 home runs that got them through it. But that White Sox defense is not good. It's terrible. You've already seen guys like Dallas Keuchel come out and speak on the young talent, saying that they don't go out there and fight. Like, they look defeated before they even play a game sometimes. I think that's a credit to manager Rick Renteria, and I don't think he's that good of a manager. I actually liked him in 2014 with the Cubs. I thought he did a great job of controlling young guys like Javier Baez when he got called up. And Arismendi Alcantara got called up that year. He did good with him, too. He's very good with those younger guys, I thought, in 2014. But then you look now, and he's got guys like Robert who are performing, but he's not doing a good job of keeping the room and winning games. He didn't win games with that 2014 Cubs team either. That begs me the question. I'm going to bring up something insane. There's a manager that's been in the headlines recently, and I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there. If you want to get along with the Dominican team that the White Sox have with Robert and Moncada and Eloy Jimenez and all them, why not bring Ozzie Guillen back to the South Side?
Oh, man. I knew exactly where you were going with that when you started talking about Dominican players. Oh, Ozzie Guillen, one of my all-time favorite baseball characters. I mean, just last week, like you touched on the clip that went viral talking about how he hated Nick Swisher, which I thought was hilarious. Hey, he was only on the team for 1 year. Yeah, 1 year too long. See, the thing is with that, though, there are going to be some players on that White Sox team that have stronger personalities that Guillen's going to butt heads with as well. So I don't think that getting a manager that's only going to appeal to 3 or 4 specific players is really the best idea long term. I don't think Renteria has gotten a feel for the whole team yet, because he has a very interesting mix of players. We've touched on the young guys like Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert and all of these younger prospects, but then they also have a bunch of veteran guys, both hitters and pitchers, Encarnacion, Keuchel, Gio Gonzalez. So it's a very weird mix of players, and Renteria I don't think has had the time to really gel with them yet. I do believe in him enough to think that he will before the end of this season, but I still stand by. I don't think the White Sox are making the playoffs this year. I think they're 1 year away while they develop team chemistry.
There's no doubt what Ozzie Guillen brings to the table is a good manager, could spark your team. But the thing is with the White Sox that they're 11-11 right now. I don't think you're giving Renteria a big enough chance to turn this thing around. Even 11-11, there's nothing really to turn it around at this point. Just play good ball the rest of the – although I will say the White Sox are playing good against the bad teams and bad against the good teams like the Indians, Twins, etc. They're beating up on the bad teams. And
yeah, he did leave on bad terms, but he does have an analyst job right now on NBC Sports Chicago covering post-game with the White Sox, and I think that's a good fit for him, bringing that personality on television. You already saw it come out with Nick Swisher, and I think Nick Swisher's one of the most lovable guys in all of baseball over his career. I mean, people in New York loved him, and he's just honestly a good guy, but he did not sit well with Ozzie Guillen. And I don't know if Swisher said anything about that. But you mentioned Rick Renteria, 11-11. Yeah, they're mediocre. You said they're beating the bad teams or losing to the good teams. But Swig touched on the last episode. Aaron Bummer's a huge blow. Jace Fry is not getting anybody out of that bullpen from the left side. And they just need to find a good little mix of putting consistent wins together because it seems like they're up and down. If they can go on a streak and maybe take 7 out of 10 sometime, they might have a good shot at maybe gaining some ground in that division, especially if it's against a division opponent. Yeah, and Yasmani Grandal finally hit his first home run of the year, and that's really good for the White Sox because he was struggling a little bit from the power department. He was getting on base. They have 2 all-star catchers there in Chicago, so getting both of their bats in the lineup, maybe getting Encarnacion a day off from here and there, that's got to be cycled in by the manager as well. So hopefully he can make the right decisions come time. Now we have some hockey, and the Blackhawks survive. How? Corey Crawford. That guy was a man in net. He was all over making stops. And I missed hearing Pat Foley, the great Blackhawks play-by-play announcer on television saying, and a great save by Crawford. He was always good at making those calls. And it always got me up out of my seat and I was clapping. He made some 10-bellers yesterday. And he definitely kept the team alive, making stops in the biggest stage. And that's just a credit to his character. He's always a guy. He's been through COVID. He got a late start, and even in the Edmonton series, when that second period with the 5-minute major he had to kill off, he's just making stops. He did give up some soft goals early on in the season, and I was calling for Subban for Game 3. But to have Crawford come out and have a performance like that got me fired up. And although I don't think we'll be talking more about the Hawks moving on in the following episode.
Yeah, you look back to the series against the Oilers. Corey Crawford had a great series then. My key component here is if the Blackhawks can get off to a good start in the first period, it might sound a little cliche, but against the Oilers, every time they won, they got off to a hot start. I think even they had maybe 4 goals in the first period in one of the games.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, if they can do that the rest of the series, which is pretty tough because their defense lacks. They need to score 3 goals each game probably. That 1 goal last game is going to be probably not – he can't keep that up, Corey Crawford, because the defense isn't great. And the power plays – I think the power play goals for the Blackhawks need to increase because it was a good goal by Alex DeBrincat last game. Took that in this best-of-7 series. But like you guys said – it's going to be hard to say the Blackhawks are going to be in it next week because they would have to rattle off 3 more.
Yeah, and you mentioned DeBrincat. I'm glad he scored that empty netter late in the game because he's had so many opportunities the game before. I mean, he was in the slot. He was getting grade A scoring chances, and Fleury was just shutting him down in Game 3. I mean, I was feeling so bad for the guy because – I mean, he's been silent not only in this restart, he's been silent the entire season. And he's finally starting to get that play back in Game 3, and it transitioned to Game 4. And I think he'll be a crucial player for them if they were to get off to a hot start because he brings that little – he's small, he gets through and gets in front of the net a little bit and gets the shots off. He has a great shot, and he had some great ace chances. You saw him smack his stick when he didn't score in Game 3. He's getting frustrated, and even though it was an empty netter, it was good to see him score. But if Crawford brings that sort of that play each and every game, I don't know, man. If he can just stand on his head, it's going to be very impossible. But if he gets 35 saves a night throughout the whole thing, I mean, they don't play back to back, so I don't know. I don't like their chances, but you got the cup winners on the team, and you saw them get under the skin late in the game. Max Pacioretty gave a little cheap shot at DeBrincat after scoring, so maybe they're feeling something over there. I don't know who their goalie's going to be the next game, whether it's Leonard or Fleury. Both guys are very good, so they're going to have to bring it.
Okay. No, I agree that the Blackhawks, their chances of actually advancing in this series are almost zero. It doesn't take a genius to tell you that you're not going to win very often. I mean, you fall down 3-0 in a best of 7. But overall, you mentioned holding Vegas to 35 shots. I don't see that happening. And even if it does, that's still way too many to be giving up and expecting to win 3 more games in a row. The Rangers have been doing that for the last 3 years. And while our goalies steal us a win about half the time, it's not a sustainable formula. And it's even less so in a playoff series. And I want to harp on something that I believe I touched on in the last episode about why the Knights are such a tough matchup for Chicago, is that they thrive as a puck possession team. And in all 4 games, win or lose, Vegas has been dominating in terms of possessing the puck. They've had it about 75% of the time from what I've been watching. They're dominating all of the statistics like Corsi and Fenwick that talk about puck possession. And the Blackhawks are being way too stagnant when they do have the puck in their own zone. Vegas is forcing a lot of turnovers. So I want to ask you, as a Blackhawks fan, if you're Colleton and your backs are against the wall for the length of this series, no matter how long it goes, and we know what type of hockey Vegas is going to play the rest of this series, what do you tell these guys? What strategies do you try to come up with to win 3 more games? Because I don't think betting on Crawford to bail them out is a good strategy.
Yeah, they are a puck possession team. And Jonathan Hood said on ESPN 1000 earlier Monday morning, he said for the second period, NBC Sports Network could have just put the camera to the right and just had the entire camera right there facing, and they wouldn't have missed a beat because they had the puck in the zone the entire time. And for the Hawks, what I think they need to do to beat Vegas is you've seen the Vegas take some stupid penalties, and the Hawks need to get that power play going if they want to win, at least move on in the series. You need to get some grade A scoring chances. They need to be physical. I love Drake Caggiula. Get him out a ton. Get him in to be a little chippy. You saw on the goal, the forecheck from Olli Mata going in and setting up Caggiula for the one-time goal, and then just getting pucks on net. Here we go. Here's my rant, fellas. All right, everybody watching, get ready. If I see Alex Nylander or Dylan Strome pass the puck to them or to anyone else, I'm going to blow an artery. I'm sick and tired. I saw a video on Twitter and laughed. It was a video of saying what Alex Nylander does when Jeremy Colleton puts him out on the ice. And it's got this guy going, "Daddy, watch me twirl." That's exactly what he's doing, because every single time he's out there, he looks clueless. You traded Henry Jokiharju to Buffalo to go get Nylander because I guess his dad played for the Hawks. Yeah, okay. He had a good career with them, but Nylander is horrible, especially in the big stage. Why hasn't he been healthy scratch? Colleton has the cojones to go ahead and scratch Adam Boquist, who's a defenseman when the Hawks don't have a defense, but he doesn't have the cojones to scratch Alexander Nylander. And that is infuriating me. And you have Dylan Strome, who needs to shoot the puck. You saw what he did in overtime. He nailed the crossbar. I mean, he needs to start shooting. And to go back to your question, I know I got off the rails there for a little bit. Yeah, they just need to be more physical than them, because, I mean, night in and night out, they just need to keep competing. And it sounds cliche, but you just got to take it one game at a time. But I don't know what their chances stand, but if they can do those things, I like them better than if they don't.
That's completely fair, but the one trap that I think a lot of teams fall into is they want to set a physical edge, and they become so focused on dominating the other teams in terms of hits that they lose focus on generating scoring chances. I know I've seen the Rangers do that on several occasions over the last couple of years. They want to set that physical edge early. I do think, especially in today's game, it's a lot more skill-based, that is a little bit overblown. You have a couple of guys who can make a physical impact. You mentioned being scared of Ryan Reeves in the last episode. He is that guy for Vegas. I think Caggiula can be that guy for the Blackhawks in terms of that checking forward, but the checking, grinding type of forward line doesn't really exist in hockey anymore. So I don't think that solely focusing on being physical is a very good strategy either. They need, in my opinion, to be more aggressive in terms of an aggressive forecheck and getting the puck and centering it immediately and having someone crashing the net at all times. If they overpass at the top of the circles, they're just going to turn it over and lead to odd man rushes. We've seen it several times, and Vegas is too responsible defensively. So I think they need to be a lot more aggressive on the forecheck, and I also think they need to stack the blue line defensively to make it more difficult for Vegas to get to the offensive zone, because right now they can just waltz in there without any resistance whatsoever, and it's making Corey Crawford's life extremely difficult.
But yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how it all works out for them. But the Islanders are looking very good. Jonah, I want you to take over the Islanders with taking 3 out of 3 and leading the series 3-0 against Washington.
Yeah, they're hot. Going back to their last series, that they've won the last 6 out of the 7 games. We all know that the clincher is usually the toughest game, but having a 3-0 cushion is beautiful. They're playing well. They're a good defensive team. And a lot of sports, defense leads to offense, and it's the same with hockey. I think with the momentum of hockey and the offensive surge in the last couple of years, defense is crucial. They're one of the best power play killing teams. I think top 4 they are. Let's get over to Swig. I think this series is all but over. Capital is a great team. 2 years ago, won the Stanley Cup. But yeah, over to Swig. What do you think about the Islanders and in their future?
Well, as much as it pains me to admit it, the Islanders have been a damn impressive team since hockey started back up. I'd make the argument, outside of maybe the Avalanche, they have been the best team in hockey since this started back up. And I know we've touched on this before, that they're very stylistically different from the Rangers and the Blackhawks because the Islanders are such a great defensive team. But I don't think that's I don't think we can state that enough, and how big an impact it's having, not only on the Islanders' success, but on limiting the Capitals' offensive juggernaut that is led by Ovechkin and Kuznetsov, and then defensively John Carlson. But like I mentioned, the Islanders have been one of the most impressive teams since the NHL restarted, and they're doing it in the exact opposite fashion of the Blackhawks and the Rangers, by thriving defensively, by playing that trademark Barry Trotz style of suffocating the defensive zone and the neutral zone, and making it much more difficult for the Capitals' big guns, specifically, I'd say John Carlson, from leading the puck up the ice and getting into the offensive zone cleanly. They have not been able to do that, and as a result, it's really limited the impact of the Capitals' extremely talented offensive players. And going forward, the Capitals don't really have a choice but to go back to a kind of old-fashioned dump and chase type of style of hockey to really get to the puck. That's their only way they're going to establish any sort of forecheck or sustained offensive zone time, because the Islanders are outstanding at keeping the puck to the outside when the team does have it in the offensive zone. So they've been extremely impressive, and they've been doing it with the defense first style, and then leading the occasional rush with their very talented top line of Matthew Barzal and Anders Lee, and they're getting guys like Beauvillier involved. So they are doing it kind of with an old-fashioned style, defense first, leading to some offense.
Yeah, I love what Barry Trotz is doing. He's one of the most underrated coaches in the National Hockey League, and he's really gelling that team together to get them to perform in the big games. And Anders Lee's giving them a lot, great captain leadership, and I think that they're on their way to make a deep run into the playoffs. They're looking really good so far. You mentioned how they need to start clogging the neutral zone and start to defend against the Capitals' big scorers. And I like what they're doing so far. I hope they can make a big run to give us more things to talk about. It'd be really cool to have a championship team right away on this debut or the start of this podcast. That'd be pretty cool. We're going to transition to basketball. Here we go. The Brooklyn Nets played game 1 of their series today, and they got their teeth kicked in. Jonah, what did you like from the Brooklyn Nets, or what did you don't like so far?
Yeah, I think Luwawa Cabarro obviously had a very good game, having 26 points. But their defense is just slouching altogether. Jarrett Allen is not getting as many boards as I might think that a tall, big man can get. You keep Toronto off the glass, and I think that you can do well. They're not a great offensive team. They're solid, Toronto is. So to give up 134 points, there's definitely some concern there. But yeah, I think I'm not you guys touched on it last podcast, how you thought maybe Brooklyn can be kind of a dark horse if they play team ball. Swig kind of thought that they don't have to play team ball, but I don't think they're that good this year. When they get Kyrie and Kevin Durant back, come talk to me. I think they'll be pretty good. But yeah, Toronto, I'm going to say Toronto's going to sweep this series. And Swig, what are your thoughts?
No, I still stand by that the Nets are a little bit more dangerous than they showed today, but they did their best Knicks impression here in game one. They were absolutely terrible. And overall, I think the biggest challenge for them, besides now missing almost their entire starting five, which is a pretty big challenge for any team to overcome, is that Toronto is an extremely balanced team right now. Since they lost Kawhi Leonard, I understand and agree with all the hype that Siakam's getting with his massive improvement the last couple years, but Fred VanVleet was the main cog today. They still have Marc Gasol on that team. They still have Kyle Lowry on that team. They have several guys and Serge Ibaka who can go in and make an impact on both ends of the floor. And with the Nets down to so many reserves, it's going to be very difficult for them to stop all of them. And today they stopped none of them, which is not a very good formula to win basketball games. But at the same time, the Nets are not in a very good position with their roster and with the injuries. So I'm not here to say that the Nets are a championship contender this year or anything like that. That's not what I wanted to insinuate on the last episode. But I do think that they are an extremely well-coached team that can steal a game or two because they are usually a much more focused team on the defensive end. And even without some of their best players, I still think they could steal a game or two in this series. But that's all going to come down to how Jacques Vaughn can refocus them after this game one walloping.
Yeah, and Jonah mentioned a few episodes back about how he thinks the Raptors can be or not really a sleeper, but a team that can make it far in this postseason. Because we touched on some NBA sleepers and predictions in one of our episodes. And Nick Nurse against Jacques Vaughn, that might be one of the most underrated coaching matchups in the postseason. And both guys are great coaches, and Jacques Vaughn has done a great job coming in this season, really transforming that team. And I don't know how far they're going to go, but it's going to be hard to take down the Raptors. But anyway, we're going to go. This episode is going to be dropped Thursday. And Thursday night, that night is going to be the ping pong ball dropping of the NBA lottery.
Yes.
The Knicks and the Bulls are in the running for the first overall pick. What do you think of their chances of getting that?
Overall, being the cynical New Yorker who already had one team get lucky in the lottery last week, I'm not feeling very good about the Knicks' chances of getting a high lottery pick. And even though part of that's just me being the cynical Knicks fan who's dealt with 20 years of terrible management and team play, the other part of it is the Knicks only finished with the 7th worst record. So their odds of moving up to the number 1 or number 2 spot are about 10 or 12%, I believe. So overall, I'm just hopeful that they can move up maybe to 4 or 5. Maybe we'll get lucky there. But long-term success for the Knicks is still several years away at least, unless a lot of things change from top to bottom. But I think that's a rant for another episode.
The Bulls have a shot at getting the number 1 pick as well. And I don't know what you guys are leaning. If the Bulls get the number 1 pick, saying they don't pick 7th for what seems to be the 4th or 5th consecutive year, I think they should go after James Wiseman. You look at all-around talent. This guy's a stretch 5. He's really good at shooting the ball. He can get inside, play good defense. And he's kind of like, I don't want to overblow him, but he kind of reminds me of an Anthony Davis coming out that can do all of those things. And if Arturas Karnisovas wants to really turn around the Bulls and make a splash, he's not going to go and draft someone that's necessarily fill a position need, because you saw him what he did with Denver. He goes out and gets the best available, and he got Michael Porter, and look how that's turning out right now. He's not with them, or Karnisovas isn't with them anymore, but Michael Porter looked really good in the restart and the postseason today. And I think that if he's going best available, who knows if Wendell Carter's going to be the a really good center in the league. I mean, he's yet to be determined. And if you pass up James Wiseman because you think Wendell Carter's good, then you got something wrong in your head.
Yeah, that's high praise saying he might be Anthony Davis, but yeah, you did retract a little bit on that. My NBA comparison actually is Hassan Whiteside or DeAndre Jordan. And yes, if the Bulls got Wiseman, I think they would be a pretty dang good team maybe in a couple years. Or anyway, back to his weaknesses. I think his weaknesses might be that he played so little minutes in college, and that might come back to haunt him in just a year or two in the NBA.
Absolutely. Now, I do want to go back and touch on, Dylan mentioned drafting for best player available rather than filling a need position-wise. And I absolutely think that is the correct philosophy to draft in almost in every sport, actually. That you do not want to pass up on the most talented player just because he doesn't fill your positional need. The only other option is to trade down a couple of spots and recoup a couple of extra draft picks if he really doesn't make any sense on the roster. But that is the only exception. I do think Wiseman is a very talented prospect for the Bulls, but I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here because we have to see where the Bulls actually end up in the lottery. If they end up picking 7th again, I doubt he'll still be there. But if they do end up in the top 3, I absolutely think he would be a great guy for them to target.
Yeah, and I actually see Kobe White transitioning to be more of a shooting guard. He's not really a great facilitator of the basketball, bringing it up the floor and sort of directing the traffic that you'd see at a lot of good point guards. So even if they were to get a top 3 pick, I think they'd be okay with someone like a LaMelo Ball or someone that can pass the ball and adds more to the offense. So you can move him over and maybe Levine down to small forward and hopefully get rid of Otto Porter's big contract or maybe trade market in and move stuff around there. But it's going to be a lot of fun to see how AK turns around the Bulls.
Yeah, no, getting rid of Otto Porter's contract would be good for any team that's stuck with it. But I do think that's going to be even more difficult, though, this year with the extremely uncertain financial situation. The NBA salary cap was most likely going to increase a lot like it has the last few years, but that is unlikely to happen this year with everything going on with the pandemic. So that'll make it more difficult for teams to unload contracts like that because people on player options are all going to opt in to the last year of their deals because they're going to be guaranteed that money that they are not going to get as free agents this year. So that is one detriment for any team with a contract they'd like to unload. There's only going to be a couple teams in the league with the cap space to take those contracts, and they're going to have to be incentivized pretty heavily to actually take them off their hands. So my thought is if the Bulls do find a taker for Otto Porter's contract, they're going to have to attach at least one first-round pick to it. And I don't know if that's worth it long-term because the Bulls are still multiple years away.
Porzingis nugget. One more thing to mention about the Bulls. They did end up firing Jim Boylan. We talked about how he might be in, might be out in our last episode, but he is out of Chicago. So they'll be in the running for a head coaching job. No financial restrictions there. We're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode, guys. I appreciate it. You guys are always fun to talk sports with. It's been a blast so far. And to all you listeners out there, leave a like, leave a subscribe, and we hope to see you again. Videos come out Thursdays around noon, and we record about every Monday night. So we're doing pretty well with that, and hope you guys have a wonderful time. See ya.